Coming up, elders are especially at risk due to isolation during the pandemic lockdown. We'll see how one organization is helping tribes help the elders. Plus, an unexpected story of relocation in California's Owens Valley. A new documentary looks at how water brought communities together. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from Indian Country Today.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalohungva. A new report finds that Native Americans are 113% more likely to face a court-martial than their white peers. The review by the Air Force Inspector General found that minorities and women are underrepresented in leadership and officer positions, and some of the largest gaps are in operational jobs like pilots and other combat-related posts. In 2020, 0.5% of those jobs were filled by Native Americans. American Indians and Alaska Natives serve in the military at a higher rate than any other ethnic or racial group, according to the Military Times. These findings echo a December 2020 review that confirmed ethnic and gender biases exist across the Air Force and Space Force. The Defense Department is now pushing plans to recruit, retain, and promote a more racially and ethnically diverse force. The Snoqualmie Casino in Washington State is victorious in its lawsuit on a COVID-19 insurance claim. The insurance company argued that because there was no physical loss or damage to the properties, the coverage was only available up to $100,000. The tribe fought back and said that its $150 million policy extends to COVID-19 because the policy stipulates all risks over physical loss or damage. The judge on the case agreed with the tribe and directed the insurance company to pay the tribe more than $100,000 on the policy. The casino is about 30 minutes from Seattle. It's the closest gaming venue with slot machines and table games. The numbers are in for Census 2020, and Indian Country's increase in population is unlikely to bring more political power. The 2020 census shows an 85% jump in the Native population from the numbers recorded in the 2010 census. Overall, the census data shows that the U.S. has grown more racially diverse. Census data is used to redraw the country's political maps. To read more about this story, go to our website, IndianCountryToday.com, and search for the headline, "More Natives Doesn't Mean More Voting Power." Glacier National Park in Montana is starting its first American Indian Artist-in-Residence program for the month of September. In 1982, the Native American Speaks program started running, and it is now the longest-running Indigenous speaker series in the National Park Service. This art-influenced pilot program is hosting tribal citizens who are ready to share with the community. The week-long residency highlights local Indigenous people whose art is influenced by the history and culture of their tribes. These artistic presentations will include Indigenous concepts of time and place, culture, and holistic healing. KULR reports this is the first time the park has hosted a residential artist program specifically for Native American artists. A prominent radio show in Canada has a new host. Sean Vanderklees was named the next permanent voice of Superior Morning. The show airs on CBC Radio across northwestern Ontario. Vanderklees is Mississauga from Curve Lake First Nation. He previously co-founded the podcast One Dish, One Mic and was awarded an Indigenous Journalism Fellowship by the Canadian Journalism Foundation. The show features both national and international news, weather reports, and features. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, two men from the Navajo Nation made history over the weekend. Kyler Frank and Glenn King announced a D1 college football game all in the Navajo language. Frank says some sports terms don't always translate into the language. He and his partner are working on putting together a guide for Native listeners to follow along.
But I think that what we were doing was stumbling a little bit over on how we were naming things. I guess like for yards, and we had to kind of go to the drawing boards. First down, and so we were kind of going back to the drawing board as we were doing it. So I told Glenn, I said, this Friday we're looking to call a game here, a local high school game. And I told Glenn, I said, we need to practice on some of the and naming the terms to be more uniform rather than, because if we're calling it, it could be confusing to the listeners.
The team is also in talks with the National Football League to broadcast the game in the Navajo language. In the past, announcers from KTNN Radio have broadcast the Phoenix Suns games all in the Navajo language. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Thalahungva. Coming up, elders have an honored place of respect in Native communities, but isolation puts them at risk. And water rights in California's Owens Valley is at the center of a new documentary. We'll be right back. It's been a rough year for families dealing with the lockdowns during the coronavirus pandemic. Elders have been especially impacted due to isolation. How harmful? One study shows that prolonged social isolation is as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day and can even be more harmful than obesity. Facing those grim statistics, the National Indian Council on Aging created a campaign to remind everyone to check up on their elders. Larry Curley is the executive director of NICOA, and he joins us today to tell us more about this campaign. Welcome, Larry.
Good morning.
Well, thank you for being here today. What signs did your organization see that caused you and alerted you to this growing problem?
Well, I think one of the things has been that there's been ongoing data and research that is being done that shows the impact of socialization. And that's really given us concern because we know how Indian communities are. They're very rural, they're isolated from one another. Transportation is difficult. And with the coronavirus, it has put our elders in a situation where they are sometimes told to stay in their home, not go out, venture too much. And so that gave us concern because of the research studies that showed what the impact is. And you just cited a statistic that is very alarming in Indian country. So we decided that maybe there's something we should do. And back in June or so, we got word that the CDC Foundation was having funds available, especially to those disadvantaged populations, which we as Indian people usually are in that group, to put together a campaign that would address the two issues of social isolation and caregivers, the needs of caregivers as well.
And when you think about the impact of isolation, it's almost hard to understand how it could affect an elder, both mentally but also physically. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that the research indicates is that when one is this socially isolated way, that the depression hits, loneliness hits. In fact, we decided we would check it out and do our own survey. And in looking at the results of the survey, we found that out of the 729 who responded to our survey, 42% felt like they were isolated and out of touch with the rest of the community. And 41% said they felt lonely a lot of the times. And so that is the impact, at least mentally. It drains the will, the hope. In terms of the physical feelings, is that they don't eat as much. They're not as willing to take care of themselves. And that's the impact physically. And once it starts having that kind of effect, it exacerbates the chronic conditions of a lot of our elders who have diabetes, heart conditions, so forth.
A lot of our families have multiple generations living in one home. Is it possible for an elder in that situation who has a lot of family around them to still feel isolated?
Well, I think that within that particular context, that there's still that relationship between family members, but there's still that need to reach out to the community, want to know what's going on in the community, want to be a part of the traditional events that go on, like the powwows, the dances, and the ceremonies that go on. When those aren't happening, they still feel disconnected from the rest of the community. And so even in the intergenerational homes that are out there, that still occurs. That still occurs.
Well, your organization created a video, so let's take a look at that video now.
Visiting with family and relatives will help us from feeling lonely or socially isolated. COVID-19 changed everything, like our ancestors who survived war, famine, and epidemics. Our elders had to make sacrifices too. The more we are socially connected with our family and community, the less health problems we will have and the longer we will live. We need to stay active to keep our spirits alive. Remember, you are not alone. Connected together, we will stand strong. For more information on elder isolation or caregiver resources, go to connectedindigenousElders.org.
Give us some examples of what tribes are doing that are really good programs.
There is a program, for example, in Zuni Pueblo in New Mexico that has put together a very comprehensive, very coordinated program that has at its core case management. Another program, for example, is up in Oneida. Oneida has done a very good program as well. When you think about Oneida, they're in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a very liberal state, and they're very responsive to the needs of people. And so Oneida has taken advantage of that, social type position of the state, where they have developed these programs similar to Zuni Pueblos. And then there's another one, for example, in Cherokee Nation, that has also put together a very comprehensive program that responds to the needs of their elderly population.
And the programs also include getting high school students involved in helping to check on elders. What about just tribe sharing information in general? Is this a time to really show what you're doing to help one another?
Yes, I think it is time. We have gone through this for a year and a half now, and it looks like it's going to be for another year or so before we move out of this pandemic era. And so we feel like this is the time to air this. People are going to be going to the health clinics out there, and they're going to be able to see some of the videos that we have produced, and just let them know that they're not alone, that we are all in this together, and that there are ways that we can help one another, share our experiences, and be able to have almost a virtual support group out there that can help one another.
All right, Larry Curley, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And when we come back, we're going to take a look at a documentary that bridges the connection between Japanese Americans who lived in a concentration camp on a tribal land and how the overuse of water has led to health issues for many people. Payahunadu, also known as Owens Valley, is a few hours north of Los Angeles. It's home to more than 10 different tribal nations. During World War II, it also became the site of a concentration camp and home to Japanese Americans who were sent there to live. Through the years, the valley also became a literal lifeline for the city of Los Angeles, and that reliance on the water created an unexpected alliance between the two groups of people. That water rights struggle is at the center of the documentary Manzanar Diverted, When Water Becomes Dust. It will open the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival next week. Let's take a look.
There's stories about things that happen here, but nobody listens. My people, my ancestors, my grandparents have lived on this lake for thousands of years. Outsiders came into this valley and renamed it. We called it Payahunadu, which means the place where the water always flows.
I was evacuated from Los Angeles on May 9, 1942. We were sent to the Manzanar concentration camp. The period I spent in Manzanar was the most traumatic experience of my life.
Manzanar is 1 square mile of land that has a deep history of forced removal.
Los Angeles owns the heart of the valley.
They came here for the water.
They are trying to recharacterize this valley as always being a desert. What made it such a desert is their pumping.
This was the lake. This was all water before that.
Many people who lived at Manzanar developed upper respiratory breathing problems, like my grandmother.
I just don't have any energy. When I walk a little ways, I get tired real fast.
Not only was water a major factor in the siting of Manzanar, water was also the means of resistance.
This water, our water, it's there for everybody. Natives, non-natives, everybody. Don't take everything.
I think we've reached a point in America where we have to look on ourselves as more of a diverse nation.
Joining us today is filmmaker Ann Kaneko. Welcome, Ann.
Hi, nice to be here.
Also joining us today is Kathy Jefferson Bancroft, and she's the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Lone Pine Paiute Shoshone Tribe in California. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both for joining us. And let me start with you. What caught your attention about this story that caused you to make a whole documentary about this?
Oh my gosh. I think that when I went, I'd often go up to the Eastern Sierras, and I realized that this was this place where all of these histories converged. And although I always knew that our water came from Northern California, the Sierras, I don't think I realized it was also where Manzanar was, or I had forgotten. And so I think that this is what sort of brought me to this journey. I realized if I didn't understand that story and how, Los Angeles, where I grew up and where my family is from, was also connected to this place, that other people should know also.
And it's so interesting. It's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. You don't really remember. But Kathy, your people are right from that area. So you grew up. Your people don't have the luxury of not remembering. Tell us a little bit about the history of your people in that region, and then the relationships that occurred when the Japanese were brought in.
Oh, my people and my family have been here since the beginning of time. So we know this, we're intimately related to this valley. It's provided everything we needed. And we had a pretty good way of life. And then outsiders came and disturbed this place. And then eventually the internment happened, which was actually incarceration of people that we knew nothing about. It was something that was talked about. It was really felt because we had a lot of family members in the war that were fighting overseas. And I have two uncles that were at Hawaii when Pearl Harbor bombed it. But even knowing that, we still didn't quite understand why they were putting all these people in Manzanar, but it was quite a sight. The people that were around then remember it vividly today, all of the people, all the cars, the buses coming through town and the big construction project they were doing. Some tribal members in this valley actually worked at Manzanar. My aunt was a young girl, and she's in the movie Beverly Newell, where she actually went to the camp with a gentleman that worked there who rented their house while her dad was in the military. So we're very closely related with everything that goes in this valley, which you found in the movie. But yeah, Manzanar was very visible, and our people have a long history with that place. So.
And the documentary touches on those relationships, but also the land itself and how lush that valley was. And there's a line in your documentary about revisionist history, basically, that people today want to say that was a big desert. Talk a little bit about that and how the landscape changed for several reasons.
So, do you want to talk about it, Kathy?
Go ahead,
Ann. So this valley became Los Angeles's watershed because of the LA aqueduct, which was, became this literally a pipe between this very lush land, the land of flowing water, and Los Angeles. And so particularly, so that was in the late 20s that happened, and very soon or actually earlier than that. And then, but I think by 1927 or so, LA had already drained Patsiata, or the Owens Lake. And so it really has impacted the land there. And then even more so during the 60s, 70s in particular, when the second aqueduct they were pumping groundwater, and the valley became even drier. So this has created a very dusty place. And, we still, Kathy can speak more to this, but, the impacts of drought are felt very strongly there. And as the water table continues to dip, to go down.
And there's the two groups of people have joined forces to fight the LA Department of Water and Power through the years because of the health issues that have come about with the depletion of the water. So there's just so many layers here. In 2019, there was the 50th anniversary of, I don't know how, tell me how you want to describe that, of the people coming back together to mark Manzanar.
The Manzanar pilgrimage, yes.
And what do you guys do at that point?
So the pilgrimage every year happens at the end of April, and it's to commemorate, um, this camp, which is I think now has really become a marker for a lot of different communities to remember this, social injustice that had happened during World War II. I think it's also become very important to the Muslim American community since Japanese Americans stood up at during 9/11. We just, it's just a few days ago that we were marking the anniversary of that day. And so I think also the Muslim ban, later just was a reminder of how many people in this country face racial injustice. And so the pilgrimage every year brings together lots of different communities to commemorate what had happened there.
Well, it's so fascinating, and it opens the Asian Pacific Film Festival soon here, and we'll watch for it on PBS. And Kaneko, thank you so much for joining us. And also thank you, Kathy, for joining us as well.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Join us again tomorrow.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run. This is Indian Country Today.